very first experience as a doula in training was having to do the observation, where you're not allowed to assist or comfort or participate or engage with the mom, merely there to observe. I went to our local state hospital and at about 7 in the evening and came across a young woman, the only person in the ward for that entire day. She was 16, the age of my oldest daughter at the time, so she could have been mine, but she was alone. She didn't have her mom had died, and there was no one else there for her. Despite the fact that she was the only person on the ward that entire day, she arrived at 11 in the morning, I got there at 7 in the evening. There was no one with her. She had been at 4 centimeters dilatation all day, hadn't moved, and they didn't expect any shift. In fact, they'd already made a note to contact the paramedics because they were expecting to have to transfer her to the teaching hospital. I arrived, there was a language barrier. My absolute intention was to sit and just observe her, but how could you possibly do that? I somehow helped her understand that I was there for her without words. I can't remember what I did. But initially she was quite, she seemed almost distrusting and somewhat averse to my presence. And, but I stayed. And a little while into the time, I think she realized that this person is here for me and I'm no longer alone. By about 9 o'clock the evening, she was starting to move into what I theoretically knew was active labor. And obviously things were shifting and things were changing. The midwives on duty at the time said that they weren't expecting her to have a baby. In fact, as I said earlier, they'd already prepared to call the paramedics to shift her, to transfer her. Anyway, she started having surges and they became very regular. And it wasn't long after that when she started making movements very, very similar to the sexual act. And she wanted to vomit. And I quickly ran around looking for a bucket for her and said to the midwives, I'm not sure, I think something might be changing. Perhaps somebody needs to come and have a look. But they were adamant that they didn't need to because at the last internal evaluation, she was still only sitting at 4 centimeters and nothing could possibly be happening at this point. Anyway, shortly after that, the paramedics arrived, and just as they arrived, they decided to check her internally, and she was at 9 centimeters. It didn't happen at midnight like they thought. It happened a whole lot earlier. Anyway, the paramedics arrived. They were in the room, and suddenly the energy shifted, and there was a palpable fear with the mom, because suddenly there's 4 green uniformed strange people in the room waiting to take her away. I tried to help her understand that I'm still here for you, and at the same time, the midwife, after doing the internal examination, said, "Oh no, she's about to give birth, so we actually need to move her over to the labor ward, which was just across the passage." And everything inside of me was, why can't she just have a baby right here on the bed? Why do we have to move her? But okay, I didn't say anything. But suddenly the lights were on, very bright white government ward lights were on. The metal bed that she was lying on was being bashed and pulled as it was manhandled across the passage, because she quickly had to get to the labor ward across the way. her eyes were round with fear. She didn't understand what was going on. The paramedics had been asked to step aside because it was apparent that this baby was being born. We got to the labor ward, and she had to get over onto the bed by herself. But something else had shifted at this point, and this baby was not coming anymore. And I have never in my entire life seen anyone sweat blood. But with every push that she was instructed to do right now, or the baby's going to die, there were beads of blood, little beads of blood on her chest that formed. That's how hard she was working to do this and to be obedient and to do what she was being told to do. She didn't push hard enough, apparently, because then the paramedics were called back in and said she actually has to be transferred right now. At which point she understood what was meant, and I tried to hold eye contact with her throughout the entire time. And when I realized that she was going to be transferred as a student doula, I didn't think that I would be allowed to get into the ambulance with her and continue with her to the next hospital. And I said to her, "I'm so sorry, but I can't come with you. I have to stay here." And she became hysterical. And I'm going to cry. I didn't think I would, but you know, it was as though, as she was leaving and as they were pushing the stretcher out, and she was screaming, "No!" and she was reaching out to me. And I was, call it a baptism of fire, hey. She left with the paramedics. I went to the sister on duty, and I said, "What's going to happen to her now?" And she said, "Oh, well, that baby's probably brain dead. We'll see what happens." And I was horrified, absolutely horrified, and I could not believe that I had entered into this world when I had such high hopes for women in birth and labor, and believing that their bodies really could work. I didn't sleep much that night. Because silly me, I thought I needed to wait until 8 the next morning to phone the hospital. I didn't realize that they were there all the time. Anyway, I waited till 8 and phoned the hospital and said, "Please put me through to the labor ward. I need to know," and I explained who I was. And because I was so terrified, I thought that something terrible had happened. End of the story was that she was actually fine, and the baby was delivered successfully with cesarean section, and they were both well. I tried to go and visit the next day, but I wasn't allowed because I'm not family, and I tried to explain she doesn't have family, but it wasn't enough. I will never forget her. She was my baptism of fire into the birth world. A few months later, a very short few months later, 2 minutes, seriously, okay. I had a paying client, a private client, a university lecturer and her husband, both university lecturers, obviously well educated, and this is their first baby. And it was a completely different scenario. And I met her when she was 16 weeks along, and I journeyed with her through that entire time, way through to the 6 months after when we met again at Need to meet the baby and just catch up. I wanted to read you some of our conversations, our email conversations, because I want you to understand that the doula is not just somebody who comes and pitches up at the birth. We are there way ahead of time. We have built relationships with these people, and we don't just walk into a room not knowing, except if we're going into a state scenario, of course. Hi, Joy. Just a quick hello and update. The antenatal visit with Dr. X this morning revealed that I'm actually 34 weeks along, which is further than I thought. But the estimated due date doesn't change. It's still September the 13th. Baby's head, which I identified correctly due to the very regular toilet visits, is low, close to my bladder, and his feet are kicking me under and in the right ribs. Thought I'd let you know. I've also been chatting with the independent midwife informally, who, even though she doesn't like working in a hospital environment, has been quite supportive too. So even though she won't be involved formally, she's been great. So I'm getting closer for the baby to come. I'm a little anxious, and Dee, my husband, is not talking about how he feels. I think he feels he needs to be supporting me and perhaps haven't made space for his feelings as much as I should have. I'm trying now, though. This has made me think about how he'll manage the labor and birth. He used to be super practical, but has become quite forgetful, slow, and sleeping more than I have. I think it's about the big life change about to happen. I wanted to tell you this because I think he'll need support too. He may or may not go into practical mode when labor happens. He may need your guidance. I've finalized the birth plan and given one copy to Dr. X. I'll give you a copy when I see you for the home visit. See you soon. Dear Nadine, I've changed the name. Thank you for the update. Glad to hear baby's growing so well and that everything is in place as they should be. One of the blessings of having a doula support is that mom's partner often feels supported too, even if they don't always have the words to express that need. You and Dee are most certainly on the brink of a life change, and it's important that this truth be acknowledged earlier rather than later. I can only suggest gentleness and open empathic discussion with one another. You've done well in surrounding yourself with caregivers who are not just knowledgeable in their sphere, but also confident in the birth process and passionate about their life calling. I look forward to visiting you in your home environment in the next 3 to 4 weeks. Lots of love and blessings. Hi, Joy. Thanks for your supportive response. Dee and I needed to talk honestly and openly about our anxieties. The anxieties are still there, but we're dealing with them together, which really just makes things so much easier. I wanted to ask you about Pulsatilla and whether you'd be able to access it. Anyway, you see the banter between us. She went on to have a really amazing, straightforward birth in hospital with her obstetrician, birthing in water, even though her doctor was saying, I don't think this is a good idea. She went ahead anyway and did what she felt she needed to do. So this stark contrast between state and private support has made me unsettled for a very long time. Surely every woman having a baby deserves this kind of support. If doula support is indeed beneficial during labor, and we all know the statistics, we all know them, as indicated by evidence-based research, shouldn't everyone have access to this transformational resource regardless of class or income level? And I'm just going to leave it with that question. Thank you.